In a forgotten corner of the city, beneath a flickering streetlight, a teenage boy sits on the cold pavement with drenched books in his lap. He dreams of college, but cannot even afford tomorrow's meal. On one stormy night, when everyone else turns away, he helps an old woman in the rain. What he doesn't know is that this single act of kindness will unlock a truth powerful enough to change his entire future. The rain was thin at first, soft drizzles that slid across the cracked pavements of the small town. But under the lone, flickering streetlight on the corner, a boy sat cross-legged, his shoulders hunched against the damp chill. His name was Ethan. 17 years old, clothes too thin for winter, his backpack frayed at the edges. Before him lay his open books, their pages curling as raindrops soaked into the paper. Still, his pencil moved across the page with determination. Equations, notes, diagrams. Each mark was a promise he made to himself. Someday, I'll go to college. Someday, I'll become more than this. Cars rolled past. Their headlights flashed across him, but no one stopped. A man in a long coat shook his head, muttering, "What's the point?" Two teenagers walked by laughing, one whispering, "Does he think he's Einstein?" Ethan's cheeks burned, but he didn't lift his eyes. He couldn't afford to. His focus was survival, his dream the only thing keeping him from breaking. The streetlight buzzed, flickered, then dimmed again, leaving him in shadow. He adjusted his umbrella, broken on one side, so that at least a corner of the book stayed dry. His stomach growled. He ignored it. Hunger was a familiar companion. He thought of his mother, gone too soon, and of the promises he whispered to her grave. "I'll study. I'll make something of myself. Even if no one believes in me, I'll keep going." A clap of thunder broke the night. The drizzle swelled into a sudden downpour. Ethan gathered his books to his chest, shielding them with his body. But one notebook slipped and landed in a puddle. He snatched it up, wiping the wet pages frantically. And that's when he saw her. An elderly woman walking carefully across the park path just ahead, her umbrella flipping inside out in the wind. The rain slicked the stones beneath her feet, and before Ethan could move, she slipped, falling hard to the ground. Pedestrians nearby saw it happen. Some glanced over, then pulled their coats tighter and kept walking. A man with headphones walked past as if nothing had happened. Ethan froze for a moment, books clutched to his chest, the rain running down his face. His mind screamed, "If I leave my books here, they'll be ruined. If I help her, I'll lose tonight's study, and maybe even my only chance to finish this assignment." But his heart didn't hesitate. He shoved his books into his soaked backpack, dropped his broken umbrella, and ran across the park. "Ma'am, are you okay?" His voice cracked as he bent down, his thin arms struggling to lift her. Her eyes, startled but kind, looked up into his. And in that instant, neither of them knew. This meeting in the rain would change both of their lives forever. The rain fell harder, a curtain of water blurring the glow of the streetlights. Ethan held the elderly woman by her elbow, helping her to her feet. She was frail, her thin coat already drenched, her hands trembling as she clutched at him for balance. "I'm fine," she muttered, though her voice shook with pain. "Just lost my footing." Her knees were scraped, and her umbrella lay twisted in the mud. Ethan bent down to retrieve it, then hesitated. His backpack, with his soaked notebooks inside, was lying abandoned on the bench. A gust of wind threatened to push it off into the puddles. His entire future, it felt, was inside that bag. But the old woman's breathing was shallow, her body shivering. Ethan's chest tightened. This was no choice at all. He dropped the ruined umbrella back into the mud, threw his own broken one over her, and whispered, "Hold on, I'll walk you home." She blinked at him, surprised. "But you'll get sick." He smiled faintly, though water streamed from his hair into his eyes. "Doesn't matter." Together they began to walk. Ethan adjusted his small frame to shield her from the wind, letting the rain soak him instead. His shoes squelched with every step, the cold gnawing at his bones, but he pressed on. The streets were nearly deserted now, only the occasional car hissing by through the water. People under awnings stared curiously, some even smirking at the sight of a poor boy carrying an old woman's groceries and guiding her through the storm. But Ethan ignored them all. After several minutes, the woman's steps slowed, her body too weary to continue. Ethan noticed her faltering and, without a second thought, offered, "We can rest at my place. It's not far." She frowned. "Your place?" He hesitated, embarrassed. His place was no real home, just a one-room apartment in a crumbling building, its roof patched with plastic sheets, its walls damp with mold. Still, it was warm enough, and it had tea. "Yes," he said firmly, "just a few more steps." By the time they reached the building, Ethan's clothes clung to his body, his lips nearly blue. He pushed open the creaky wooden door, guided her inside, and switched on a small lamp. The apartment was bare. A table with 2 chairs, a mattress in the corner, stacks of books piled higher than the shelves could hold. The kettle sat on a rusty stove, and a cracked mug waited beside it. Ethan quickly lit the stove, poured water into the kettle, and said apologetically, "It's not much, but I can make tea." The old woman lowered herself into the chair, looking around quietly. There was no judgment in her eyes, only something softer, something unreadable. "You gave me your umbrella," she said at last, "and now this." Ethan shrugged, turning away to hide his flushed face. It was nothing. But deep down, he didn't know that this nothing had already planted the seed of everything to come. If this moment touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with us. Steam curled from the chipped mug as Ethan placed it in front of the old woman. The warmth of the tea filled the room, a sharp contrast to the storm raging outside. Rain lashed against the window, dripping through the cracks in the old frame, but for the first time that night, the air inside felt calm. The woman cupped the mug with trembling hands, her eyes fixed on the boy bustling around his tiny kitchen, as if it were a palace. He wiped the wet floor with an old towel, wrung out his soaked shirt, and sat across from her, his thin arms wrapped tightly around his chest, to fight the cold. "You shouldn't have troubled yourself," she said softly. Ethan shook his head. "It was no trouble." He gave a small smile. "Besides, if I'd left you there, who knows what might have happened." The woman studied him for a long moment. His face, pale with exhaustion, carried more weight than his years should have allowed. His eyes, deep, determined, spoke of battles she couldn't see. Finally she asked, "You were studying out there, weren't you, in the rain?" Ethan glanced down, embarrassed. "I didn't have anywhere else to go. The library closed hours ago. My room is too dark at night, and the light bills are, well..." He trailed off, tapping the table nervously. "And what were you studying so late?" she pressed gently. His voice brightened just slightly. "Physics. I want to be a scientist. Maybe even study aerospace one day. I've always dreamed of working in labs, building things that can change the world." His excitement flickered, then dimmed as quickly as it came. "But dreams are expensive. Tuition is out of reach. Even my school fees are hard to cover." The woman didn't interrupt. She sipped her tea, listening, letting his words fill the space. He looked up suddenly, as if ashamed of sharing too much. "I'm sorry. You must think I'm foolish. Most kids my age are thinking about phones, clothes, hanging out with friends. I just want a chance to learn, that's all." The woman's eyes softened. She leaned back, watching him in silence. There was a gravity in her gaze, as though she was weighing more than just his words. She was weighing him. "You remind me," she said slowly, "of someone I once knew. Someone who never stopped reaching, even when the world told them to stop." Ethan tilted his head, puzzled. Did they make it? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Yes, but only because someone believed in them when no one else did. He blinked, caught by the strange, almost wistful tone in her voice. Before he could ask more, she stood up slowly, her joints stiff but her posture dignified. "It's late. I should be going." Ethan jumped up, panicked. "But the rain, it's still pouring. At least wait until it stops." She shook her head gently. "No, my dear, I'll manage." Ethan hurried to grab her umbrella, still broken, still dripping, and handed it to her. "Please, at least take this." She looked at the boy one last time, her eyes lingering, as though memorizing his face. "You've given me far more than an umbrella tonight," she whispered. And then, without another word, she stepped out into the storm and disappeared into the night. Ethan stood frozen at the doorway, the silence of his tiny room pressing in around him. He didn't know it yet, but this would not be the last time he saw her. The next morning Ethan woke to a beam of sunlight slipping through the cracks in his curtains. For a moment he wondered if the night before had only been a dream, the storm, the fall, the woman sitting at his table. But the damp towel on the floor, the empty mug with a tea stain, and the faint trace of perfume in the air told him otherwise. He expected she might return, maybe to thank him again or to retrieve her broken umbrella. But days passed, and she never came back. Ethan often glanced toward the park as he walked home from school, his eyes searching the benches, the bus stop, the paths slick with rain, but there was no sign of her. Life quickly pressed in again. His notebooks were nearly ruined from the storm. His landlord had banged on his door about late rent. His teachers praised his grades, but reminded him sternly that scholarships required fees he couldn't pay. The burden felt heavier than ever. One evening, while sorting through his papers at the small wooden table, Ethan's hands trembled. He had spent hours writing essays for competitions, hoping someone, anyone, might notice his work. But as he looked at the ink running across the rain-damaged pages, the weight of it all threatened to crush him. He lowered his head into his hands. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just chasing a dream I can never reach. That night he almost didn't study. For the first time in months he considered giving up. But then, weeks later, a letter arrived. It was an envelope of heavy cream paper, different from the bills and notices that usually slipped under his door. His name was written neatly in ink across the front. Hand shaking, he tore it open. Dear Ethan, we are pleased to inform you that you have been awarded a full scholarship to St. Andrews University, covering tuition, housing, and living expenses. Your determination and potential have not gone unnoticed. Please report for orientation on the 10th of next month. Ethan dropped the letter, his eyes wide. This has to be a mistake, he whispered. He had never even applied for St. Andrews. It was one of the most prestigious universities in the country, a place he had only dreamed about in secret. He reread the letter 3 times, his breath shallow. His heart pounded with a mix of disbelief and joy, tears stinging his eyes. For the first time, the impossible seemed possible. But one thought gnawed at him. Who saw me? Who made this happen? As he tucked the letter carefully into his notebook, his mind flashed back to the rainy night, the woman's gentle eyes, her cryptic words about belief. Someone believed in them when no one else did. Ethan whispered the memory aloud, his voice barely audible. Was it her? He didn't know yet. But the answer waited for him just weeks away, in a grand hall filled with strangers and one familiar face that would change his life forever. The morning of orientation arrived with a golden sunrise spilling across the city. Ethan's worn shoes tapped nervously against the marble steps of St. Andrews University. The building towered before him, majestic and intimidating, its grand columns rising toward the sky. For a boy who had studied under streetlights, this place felt like another world. Students streamed through the gates, confident, laughing, dressed in crisp clothes that spoke of privilege. Ethan kept his head down, clutching the scholarship letter like a lifeline. He felt the weight of eyes on him, whispers trailing after his frayed backpack and second-hand jacket. But none of that mattered. He was here. Somehow, impossibly, he was here. Inside the great hall, the buzz of voices echoed against high ceilings. Faculty members sat at a long table on stage, while rows of new students filled the seats. Ethan slid into the back row, his heart pounding, his fingers still trembling from disbelief. The orientation began with speeches from professors and administrators, their words blurred into the background, talk of excellence, opportunity, responsibility. Ethan tried to listen, but his mind raced. Who made this happen? How am I here? And then he heard a name. Please welcome Dean Emeritus, Professor Margaret Hale, who has joined us today to bless this new generation of scholars. Ethan's breath caught. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his gaze to the stage. There she was, The old woman from the rain. The same woman who had sat in his kitchen, sipping tea from his cracked mug, listening to him speak of dreams he thought would die in the shadows. Her posture was dignified, her silver hair gleaming under the lights, her presence commanding the entire hall. Ethan's chest tightened. It felt as though the ground had fallen away beneath him. Professor Hale stepped to the podium. Her eyes swept across the hall, pausing just long enough for Ethan to feel the weight of her gaze. And then, with a faint smile, she began. "Years ago," she said, her voice steady but warm, "I learned that brilliance is not always found in polished halls or privileged homes. Sometimes it hides under a broken umbrella, or studies beneath a flickering streetlight, or shares the last piece of bread when it has nothing else to give. True greatness begins with character, kindness, perseverance, sacrifice." Ethan's throat burned as her words sank in. The room erupted in applause, but he barely heard it. He was frozen, tears blurring his vision. After the ceremony, when students filed out, Professor Hale approached him. Up close, her eyes were exactly as he remembered, kind, sharp, unforgettable. "You helped me when no one else stopped," she said gently. "You gave me warmth when you had none to spare. And that told me everything I needed to know about who you are." Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. His voice broke as he whispered, "It was nothing." She shook her head. "No, Ethan, it was everything." From her bag, she handed him a folder filled with documents, his scholarship details, mentorship papers, a future he had never dared to imagine. "Now," she said, smiling softly, "it's my turn to help you." Ethan held the folder to his chest, the weight of years of struggle breaking into tears of hope. For the first time, he stepped into a future he believed was his. If this moment inspired you, show some love with a like and subscribe to be part of the next story.